Hello and welcome into BTN's Take 10 podcast. This is Alex Roux of BTN.com. We're back in 2019 with an all-new episode of the Take 10 podcast. It's been a while since we've dropped one, just this past holiday season with the way the holidays kind of fell on Mondays and Tuesdays are usually the days I record and try and get guests. And I just had to kind of shelve it for a couple of weeks and enjoy the holidays and now get back at it now that we're in 2019. So got a great interview coming with a former Big Ten football player for this episode, and we have a stat head segment as well, the segment we do each week with BTN researcher Harold Shelton. It's back for Big Ten basketball season as it's in full swing. We kind of put a bow on the college football season as well with some college football playoff general thoughts and evaluation of how the Big Ten performed these last few weeks in the bowl games. So the football player I mentioned is former Purdue quarterback David Blough. David has really risen to prominence in his last couple years. I'm sure you know his name if you're a Big Ten football fan. He led Purdue to back-to-back bowl appearances. He's been really an outspoken guy, kind of the face of that program under Jeff Brom, and also was good friends with Tyler Trent, who recently passed away following his battle with cancer. So, you know, the David Blough interview is timely in the fact that he just played his final game for Purdue a couple weeks ago, and unfortunately it's also timely as well because he was good friends with Tyler, who was a friend of the show as well, was a guest a few months back after that Ohio State game. And since Tyler passed away on New Year's Day, I was very thankful that David was able to come on and pay tribute to his friend. We do talk about Tyler at length, and David does a great job reflecting on Tyler's life and kind of the friendship they built. And then, you know, even though football talk kind of seems pretty insignificant after that, David and I got into plenty of in-depth discussion on his career at Purdue, his path to the Boilermakers, his ups and downs in his career, and just, you know, a ton of in-depth chatter that I think Purdue fans will really enjoy. Even some stuff that diehard fans, we get into some stuff that really close followers of the program will still be interested to hear, might not be aware of, such as, you know, kind of what the vibe was like on the ground when Jeff Brom was being courted by Louisville and the uncertainty was kind of swirling there. And David also gave a clear-eye assessment of the unfortunate, if you're a Purdue fan, unfortunate result in the Auburn game and kind of why the Boilermakers got destroyed in that one and how the program moves forward from that disappointing ending to what all things considered was a really good season for Purdue in year 2 under Jeff Brom. So that discussion with David Blough is coming up. It's a lengthy one. It's about 45 minutes. He's very generous with his time. And then following that chat, we have Stat Hit segment with Harold Shelton. So before we get to the discussion with David Blough, just a quick reminder that you can find the Take 10 podcast on Google Play, on Podbean, and of course on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. And it's also on YouTube as well, on the Big Ten Network YouTube channel. So you can subscribe on any of those platforms and you won't miss an episode of the Take 10 podcast. All right, now let's get to our discussion with former Purdue quarterback David Blough. Like I said, we go about 45 minutes on all things Purdue football, on Tyler Trent, and a whole lot more. It's a Take 10 podcast discussion with David Blough. It starts right now. Very pleased to be joined by a 4-year quarterback for Purdue. He's a highly respected college football player on a national scale, and he's about to begin the next phase of his career. It's David Blough. David, thanks so much for joining me.
Alex, thanks so much for having me on. This is great.
Absolutely. And David, just off the top of the show, I first want to offer my condolences to you and all the Purdue community on the loss of your good friend, Tyler Trent. I was lucky enough to know him personally as well, not quite as closely as you knew him, and you know, he couldn't have been nicer or more gracious. So it's just a profound loss for all of us.
Well, thanks, Alex. You know, somebody like Tyler brought our entire community together. You know, we miss him. We love his family, and he really meant so much to the entire Purdue community. I'm looking forward to, you know, sharing some of those stories and things like that on the podcast.
Yeah, and your relationship with Tyler has been heavily documented, obviously, in the national spotlight on College Game Day. You were side by side with him at the recent ESPN Awards. You were by his bedside when the cameras weren't on in kind of the last days of his fight with cancer. So just take me back to the beginning. How did this friendship originally come about?
Yeah, so believe it or not, when that kind of legacy of superfan came about for Tyler was when he camped out for that Michigan game, and that was kind of the first all of our Purdue family kind of learned of his fandom and his cancer story. And so, my family has been impacted by cancer. My mom's a cancer survivor, and other members of my family have been impacted by it. And, like everybody has, you feel this connection to someone. And the first time I actually got to meet Tyler after learning his story back September 2017 versus Michigan, the first time I got to meet him was when he came and joined us as a captain, an honorary captain on the field for the Nebraska game later that year. And we really kind of hit it off there, and then kind of continued our friendship through the winter and into the spring. And Purdue does a great thing through the Center for Cancer Research, where they do a 5K, 10K run every year called the Hammer Down Cancer 5K. And that's where I really got to spend a great amount of time with his family and him for the first time, and kind of dive deeper than just the surface level friendship and relationship.
Yeah, and his story really came in the national spotlight before that game against Ohio State, because his fight was featured on College Game Day. Obviously, you were in that piece as well. And I remember watching that, and there was a real doubt as to whether he would make it to West Lafayette for that game. Did you talk to him or interact with him in the week leading up to that game? And did you think he was going to be able to make it, in body, not just in spirit, to that upset of Ohio State?
We didn't know, actually, believe it or not, that he wasn't doing too well that week. We had taken him the game ball after Nebraska, and we knew ESPN was coming through and wanting to do the piece for game day on him. But at the time we took him the game ball at Nebraska, we thought, he was doing okay, and he'd for sure be able to make it with us, for the season, and definitely to the Ohio State game. And then, my mom and his mom actually became good friends, and my mom had informed me that he wasn't doing too well. And then, you saw the bit on College Game Day, and you sit there and you start wondering, you don't know exactly. And I hadn't really been in communication with him throughout that week as we were preparing, and he was going through his own things that, are unfathomable for people who aren't going through what he was dealing with. And so we didn't have that much communication, but there was something different about that night, and it was him being there, a part of it, them announcing that he's in the crowd, and the entire place who had seen that piece, the 26 million people who had seen the ESPN Game Day piece. And there was just something different about that night, and Tyler being there is what made it the story what it was.
Absolutely, and it was my favorite moment of the college football season for sure, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that sentiment. And when it comes to Tyler's just overall energy, we saw that he wasn't feeling too hot in that week leading up to the game, but in the months that followed, he's had so much energy, especially considering what he was going through. He was so positive, and that was really a big part of what inspired so many people. I don't know, I just want to get your take on how do you explain that energy that he had, going to all these events despite what he was battling. Why do you think that was that he was able to do that despite, his battle?
I like to share the entire Trent family's humility. They are so gracious for everything that they've been able to do. Tyler felt that he had a responsibility with this cancer, this disease that he was fighting against, that it was his responsibility to share his story so somebody in the future might not suffer the same thing, the same way, the same pain that he's experienced, and that there might be an answer to it. And if that's not the greatest act of selflessness, the greatest act of courage and, commitment to joy through adversity, I don't know exactly what is. And I know, everybody knows Tyler was a man of faith, and he lived it. And, he and I share that. he shares that with a lot of people throughout this world. And for him to grasp that at the age of 20, though, that whether he was miraculously healed and lived till 75 and could live here on earth and tell his story and share the grace that he knows from God, or if he died and in his death, his story was being told and his testimony was being told at 20 years old, but is an incredible lesson for everybody to learn from, and really his entire family. It has been such a huge blessing to get to know him and, you know, Blake and Ethan and his dad, Tony, and his mom, Kelly, and they've just been a fantastic example of how you're supposed to live, how you're supposed to attack each obstacle that you're going into with joy. That's the verses that are on that wristband. Rejoice always, pray continuously, and give thanks in all circumstances. It doesn't say in some circumstances, it says all, and that's what they believe to their core.
Yeah, well said, and I'm really glad that he got to fulfill that mission, you know, not only of giving back to others in that community, but seeing his story told on a global scale as it was. And, you know, like, it wasn't just the big news outlets that he was willing to go on. I mean, in the days after that Ohio State upset, I messaged him and asked if he'd come on this podcast, and he didn't hesitate. He said he would be honored to come on this podcast, which, you know, compared to College Game Day or Scott Van Pelt's Sports Center is nothing, but he said he'd be honored to do it, and that just really hit home for me. So it's been great. And David, before we move on, I want to ask one more question on Tyler.
Yeah.
We all kind of feel like we know Tyler Trent just because his story was so widespread, but you really had a more personal relationship with him. So what's something that people might not know about Tyler that you learned about him as you guys grew closer?
Man. You know, something everybody knows, or, you know, who's somewhat seen his story could probably tell that he was intelligent. But, you know, he was at Purdue on a presidential scholarship, almost perfect SAT score. And so whenever I saw Tyler, whenever we got to spend time together, even when we were on the airplane to Atlanta, Tyler was reading books. He was working on his iPad. He was writing his speeches for whatever he's going to share at the college football award show. This young man was incredibly intelligent and could comprehend so much. And I love telling the story of something even right before we're about to wheel out on the stage at the college football award shows, and he's going to, you know, receive the award, the Disney Spirit Award. He's sitting back there. He pulls up his phone and he looks at his notes. And in the middle, I see his verse, and I say, you know, the verses that mean a lot to him. I say, "T, are you going to share those with everybody?" He said, "Yeah, that's been my rock. I have to share it with them." And it was just cool to kind of get even for me, being there kind of as an adopted son with that family and adopted brother to Tyler for the weekend, just to see how he carried himself kind of in everyday life. And even in the midst of this disease that was attacking his earthly body, it was never attacking his spirit.
Well, it's all really well said, David, and it's been awesome to watch how you guys, not just you, but the Purdue team and community embraced him and his cause, and now we all know that his legacy at Purdue will definitely outlive all of us. So I appreciate that perspective.
Oh,
and, you know, there's really no good way to transition out of this from such a somber and serious topic, but I do want to get into your personal path while I have you on the show now that your Purdue career is over. So,
yeah.
David, I got to ask, you know, now that college football is over for you, what are you up to now? Are you done with classes and everything? You just training for the next level?
I'm done with classes, and I've since moved back to Dallas, and I'm living at home right now, getting ready for the draft. I'm training at a facility called the Michael Johnson Performance Center in McKinney, and going to go play in the East-West Shrine game next week. You know, hopefully get evaluated and earn my invite to the combine, and I'm just going to try my hand at the next level and you know, take whatever the game kind of has to offer at that point. If they want me and they're calling, I'll be there, and I'm going to play as long as people want me to play, and I've got some other plans. Tuesday, I'll be going back to Indianapolis for Tyler's funeral, obviously, and then in March, I'll get married to my high school sweetheart, Melissa Gonzalez. We're getting married and planning on starting our lives together too. So that's kind of what's going on for me this spring, and we'll see what happens.
Congratulations on the wedding. That's awesome. All grown up almost, and
I know. I'm 23 years old with gray hair and getting married. Yeah,
you're an old soul. I got to ask: is it a situation for you where if the NFL comes calling, that's great, but if not, you might start the next chapter of your life, or you have your eyes on something like the CFL or with these new football leagues coming up, like the XFL in a year or two, or I think there's a league called the Alliance. Would you try your hand in any of that?
Yeah, I certainly would. I think obviously the top goal is the NFL, and that's what I'm pursuing. But I've had conversations with Brian Brom, our quarterback coach, about the CFL and his time that he spent in Canada a little bit, and I know some of the other guys playing in the Alliance. So I know there's a spot for me somewhere. I love this game. I'm gonna go after it for the next few years. That's for sure.
Well, David, if you end up playing somehow in the XFL at some point, you have to do a repeat rendition of your coach Jeff Brom's legendary interview when he played in the XFL.
Deal. I think if I get into the XFL and something like that were to happen, I'll for sure remake that video for everybody.
All right, sounds good. And while you're training now in Texas, living at home, is there any time to just chill a little bit, or is it kind of all gas, no breaks for you as far as your training goes?
Well, there's in the schedule for the training, there's one off day, but even those are filled with recovery and things like that. But right now it's kind of all gas, no breaks, and I'll be Tuesday I'm going back to Indy, and then I'll be leaving for the East West Shrine game. So obviously that'll be all business, but even while I'm on a resort, Florida, kind of getting to enjoy that, I'll try to kind of take it all in and maybe relax a day out there or so, but I'm going to need to be on the top of my game if I want to impress some of the NFL personnel.
So say you do get some free time. What does David Blough do when it's not football related? What are some hobbies?
Oh, goodness. Right now it's been sticking stamps on envelopes and wetting my fingers and enclosing wedding invites for my fiance. That's been my task in my free time now. But tonight I think I've got some of my high school friends coming over. We're going to watch the Dallas Cowboys game, watch the Cowboys Seahawks, and that's kind of how I spend my time. It's either relaxing, watching sports, or hanging out with my girl. So pretty much one of those two options.
You a big Cowboys fan?
I was born and raised in Dallas, so you're pretty much forced to be. But at this point, I've kind of lost all my loyalty just over the time. Making teammates who, D'Angelo is playing in Green Bay or Jordan Bruce is playing in Seattle. I'm rooting for guys more so now than I am for teams.
That makes sense, I guess. Yeah, you're not alone in that either. I feel like talking to guys who are transitioning to the pro career, it's hard for them to really root for their childhood team anymore.
Yeah, it is.
So now that your Purdue career is over, and even though you've been really prominent, especially these past couple years, in the eyes of just your average college football fan, I'm not sure people outside Purdue kind of realize the peaks and valleys that your entire experience at Purdue kind of entailed. So just to get into all that, I want to start at the very beginning. And the way you received your Purdue offer itself was pretty unique, as from what I've read.
Yeah, so it was May of, I guess, 2013, where I was a junior getting ready for my senior season, kind of that summer of training, and I had been invited to the Elite 11 finals by Trent Dilfer and his staff. They do an incredible job. And Trent had actually had Drew Brees kind of reach out to me to offer that official invite to the Elite 11. And that happened. And Trent did that because I had told him that Purdue had been pursuing me pretty hard, and I think Purdue would have offered anyways. But when Drew Brees extended the offer to me to come to the Elite 11 finals, it put some pressure on Purdue pretty much immediately to offered me a scholarship, and that was my first offer. I fell in love with it, and I'm glad I did, man. I'm thankful for it all.
How can you say no to that? You know, Drew, it's a lot of pressure getting
Right.
offer from the GOAT.
I know. He's first class. So when that came through, you know, I was nervous because the night before, Drew had actually tweeted something like, tomorrow I'm going to extend the 5th Elite 11 invite to somebody, and we share a lot. You know, there's a lot in common. And, you know, I'm from Texas. He is. Similar initials, similar in stature. And so I was sitting there thinking, wow, this could really be me he's talking about. And for it to come through the next day, that was incredible.
Yeah, really cool. And getting to your Purdue career now, just as an observer from the outside, looking at the last 4 or 5 years, I kind of put the line of demarcation in your college career after your sophomore season. So I consider it kind of before Brohm and after Brohm. I know for someone who lives it, you know, it's so much more that goes into it than that. But to put things in perspective, you were a starter your freshman, sophomore seasons. Team overall wasn't very good, and you led the nation in interceptions your sophomore year with 21. Yep. So just where were you at confidence-wise after that season with a new coach coming in, didn't win a lot of games, and you didn't really know what to expect? Where was your head at?
Well, I think as a quarterback, that's something kind of at a young age is ingrained in you. And for the ones who have success and are able to play at a high level in high school or college or professional level, you have to be able to turn on the film, accept your criticism. So, you know, while I led the country in interceptions, and I'll tell anybody that, I'm thankful for it because it made me work harder. You know, we had a lot of good things that happened that year as well. We had, you know, 3,300 passing yards and a bunch of touchdowns, and then, yeah, we also led the country in interceptions. But if you're the right kind of person, you go back and you get better from those things. You learn from, okay, how come I didn't see that linebacker? How come I didn't see that safety? Or why was my decision to try to force the ball right there? You know, different things that you can go back and reflect on and get better because of it. And I'm glad I did. And with a new coaching staff coming in, I knew after I had just led the conference, led the nation in turnovers, that I was going to have to improve drastically if I wanted to see the field with a new staff. And, you know, I had seen what Coach Brohm had done with 4,000-yard passers, 40 touchdown guys, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I was going to work incredibly hard to show him that I could improve my decision-making and be somebody that he could trust on the field.
Well, after that season and when Brohm was first kind of getting established at Purdue, your confidence from the outside looking in seemed completely fine because you were selected to deliver the keynote speech at the Big Ten kickoff luncheon here in Chicago during Big Ten Media Days. So how did that whole process come about?
You know, I was informed by our SID or Matt Rector back in, I think, June of the year that I was going to be attending Media Day, and that he asked if it would be okay if they submitted my name to be under consideration for the keynote speech. And kind of once they started, you know, the talk of it, I went and I was like, oh, man, this is a huge deal. And so I watched Kirk Cousins and I watched John Urschel and Nate Sudfeld and guys like that, and I was, you know, trying to think of what I would say. And I didn't even know if I had, you know, gotten the gig or not. And later on, probably about 2 weeks before the luncheon, maybe 3 weeks before the luncheon, they called me and said, you're going to be the keynote speaker, and, you know, what do you want to talk about? And I had no idea. I had no idea what I wanted to share. And then I was actually writing a paper for my class about my we had to do an ancestry thing, ethnicity background, and where all my people came from, and you know, where all my ancestors came from. And it kind of sparked the fire in me that, you know, I was a part of a team that had so many people from so many different places. And that was the story that I wanted to share, that football brings people together. And you know, I actually even emailed the professor and thanked him for the assignment. The first time I ever did that in my life. I thanked the professor for the assignment that he gave us, because it made me think about, you know, all the different people that I was close to, and, you know, it was what football had brought me, and I just kind of wanted to share that, and knew I had a great platform to put that out on a really a national stage.
Were you nervous going into that? Because I remember sitting there watching it, and honestly, it reminded me of a politician speaking. Like, you were composed, you delivered on all the lines, and you had the whole room kind of in the palm of your hand, and everyone reacted accordingly. You got a standing ovation, and it's just an awesome speech. So did you have any underlying nerves? Because if so, you didn't show it.
I was definitely nervous leading up to it, but kind of once it's like a game. I think all the football players you talk to would say, well, once you get that first hit out of you, once you, that first play's out or incompletion or completion, once that first one's down, you kind of just get in rhythm. And for me, I was just, got up there and just started flowing. I had my 3 pages of notes in front of me, but I think one time I might have had a little hiccup and I tried to look down and I was already on the second page and I wasn't going to go through and find it. So it just started flowing and it just came out because of the times that I had practiced it and tried to, prepare for it. And, luckily I had prepared and it just came out, everything that I wanted to share. And that's what kind of made that day special was, I shared this message that was powerful and on my heart, and my preparation for it had paid off as well. So that was an awesome experience. And the support received from that was as incredible as anything that I've ever been a part of. Letters from Kirk Ferentz and Coach Chris at Wisconsin, his mom actually wrote a letter, things like that. You never imagine how far the span or reach of something you say can go.
Yeah, it's really cool. If I ever teach a class on public speaking, I think I would pull that video up and show it as an example of what to do.
Well, thanks, Alex.
Back to the field. Now that Brahm has arrived and is now your coach, you guys do a complete 180, win a bowl game your junior year. However, personally for you weren't able to finish that season. You dislocated your ankle in the Illinois game. So going through that experience with things kind of turning around on the field for the team as a whole, where was your confidence at knowing that, okay, this is a battle now for me to earn my spot back heading into my senior year?
Right. And, while I dislocated my ankle and kind of right at the point where I was finally getting to play a little bit and start some consecutive games, it was awesome to see what the team was accomplishing, even, while I wasn't particularly getting to be a part of it. And, sometimes it was hard because I wanted to be there and I wanted to experience it with them. Sometimes it was hard to watch Elijah have so much success, but that was the pride in me that I had to fight. And at the end of the day, I learned through it all, and I knew because of other things that I'd been through, the down times that we had, that this was about Purdue at the end of the day. And that's where I found my joy, was seeing, Jawan Bentley get to go to a bowl game as a senior after he had worked so hard, and Elijah come back and have the incredible games after he was battling the knee injury, the ACL. I was finding my joy in these guys having so much success, even though I wasn't getting to be a part of it on the field. But when people work so hard, when you bleed and sweat and cry and things like that together, those bonds are formed, and you want to see people have success. And that's where it felt so good for me to be a part of, even though I wasn't on the field. And, the guys kept encouraging me. I had great support around me. I had a great plan with the training room, and we made strides on my recovery. And I just set goals and those things as well to know that, if I came back the next year, it was going to be a competition. But if Coach Brahm said, hey, you got a shot at this, I was going to be there. I wasn't going to get up and leave my guys that I'd been there with for 4 going on 5 years at the time.
And not to linger on the injury, but one of the coolest moments, memories at least I have from your career, is you in the ambulance reacting to the touchdown your teammates scored, where the camera was on you and you kind of sat up and reacted. That was pretty neat.
Yeah, we had been like that all year. If I was slumping, Elijah would come in and play great, or he had a bad drive or two, I'd come in and try to pick them up. And, that's what we are. Our Purdue quarterbacks take a lot of pride in being there for one another. It's not like that everywhere, and it's not always been like that at Purdue. But Elijah and I, the relationship, that was a special moment.
So speaking of the quarterback competition and kind of everything that went into that heading into training camp, I just want to bring up an observation I had when we visited West Lafayette back in August and observed a practice. Your coaching staff, and like this includes all the assistants and all the support staff, that staff was the most vocal coaching staff that I had seen of all the 14 practices we'd been to, and it seemed like you guys had the most fun out of everyone. Like, they got on you guys, but it was in a good-spirited way. What was that like, and was that a difference from your last staff that you had before Jeff Brom got there?
Yeah, I think having coaches who played quarterback, they understand, kind of what a practice needs to be like. They understand how to get the most out of their players, and, they understand that competition needs to happen. And sometimes if the players aren't bringing the juice, our coaches are going to bring it until the players pick it up. So like Jamarcus Shepard and Coach Poindexter in the back end, coaches the safeties, and Coach Jackson, they're going to jaw back and forth until their players kind of take on the identity of their coach. And they've made it a lot of fun. And, Coach Brom has been seen kind of, ripping his quarterback every once in a while. And Brian Brom's the good cop. Jeff Brom sometimes the bad cop on the field. There's all kinds of different dynamics, and they've made it fun. And they're the reason, Purdue's having success, obviously. I think any outsider looking in can see that. And that's what makes it special, is that they have been so good to the guys who have worked hard and not had any success. Other places people can come in and kind of weed out those juniors and seniors who were a part of some 3-9 teams or whatever, and do it their own way. Coach Brom had totally embraced our classes and used us to help get the program pointed in the right direction, and that's what I'll be forever grateful for. Just while if Purdue's a year or two away from competing for a Big Ten West championship, at least I'll know, I got to be a part of the foundation that helped point it in the right direction, and that's all because of Coach Brom.
So that energy they had, especially with the assistant coaches and the players kind of playing along, that wasn't just because you had the Golden Black Days documentary crew there, right? That wasn't just for the cameras.
Man, that's every day, especially with Coach Shep, man. That's every day. They're bringing it, competing, the GAs, everybody wants, whether it's offense winning the day or defense, it's a competition. And I think that's why we've had so much success. Really, is because of how they made practice.
Was it weird, like, having a Hard Knocks type crew around in training camp? Do you have to alter your behavior at all, or was it just kind of background noise eventually?
I think at first you kind of learn some stuff about your teammates that you didn't know. You see the guys who have to be in front of the camera, and there's some guys who absolutely hated it. Then you see who's willing to push the limits of what they can and can't say on camera, and obviously, the majority of it's going to be approved and cut out. But you kind of learn about your teammates, and it was a fun time to have that crew around. Though I wish everybody got to experience that. But there were some tough times too. There's some hard hitting questions. I didn't win the starting quarterback job, and that was public television, right? So everybody has their own things, but overall, that Golden Black Days was a blast for our team. Sorry. Did
you guys watch the episodes together? Did you watch all of them, or did you not really have time to do that?
I watched, I think, the first two, and then I kind of knew how the third one was going to end, so I ended up not watching the third one, and we watched them together, and that was kind of, if we had time, we'd come home and watch them together, but we enjoyed it. You'd have funny clips. Kirk Barron is kind of one of the main characters, and you kind of see whose roles would be on display in different episodes. And Jake Thieneman's like, yeah, well, they came out to the house, or I had to drive in with them in the car, and they're telling the stories of what happened, so you kind of watch to see if the funny stories that your teammates tell you are actually on TV or not.
All right, well, David, you eventually won the starting job. Obviously, this most recent season's fresh in all of our minds. You guys beat 3 ranked teams, including the Ohio State game. Had a bunch of exciting games. You had a few close losses that could have gone the other way,
right,
and earned another bowl berth. Big star, though, this season was Rondale Moore. What was it like having a weapon like him? Was it kind of – I feel like observing it is just like having the guy in Madden who has like the 99 boosters that you can just dump it off to and watch him go.
Yeah, that's exactly how Rondale is. He's a phenomenal athlete, but he is a pro. I'll tell you what. He comes in, he's ready to work. He eats well. He takes care of his body. He studies the playbook as much as anybody on our team, and he wants to understand the coverages. At only 18 years old, that's uncommon, and that's what makes him so great. He catches a slant, breaks a tackle, and goes for 70. That makes him fantastic too, but he does all the little things right. I'm lucky to get to play with him. I share with people, a good line and good receivers make it easy on a quarterback. Rondale is a big part of that. I share when, people come up to me and say, what's it like, being around Tyler Trent? What's it like being around Tyler Trent? And I'm like, I'm a part of his entourage, and I just want to tell his story. I say Tyler's like a good wide receiver and good O-line. They just make it easy on me to share his story. I always like telling that story about Tyler as well. But, Rondale kind of made this season special for us.
For sure. And, it's been talked about at length. It'll be played on highlights for years to come. But after that win against Ohio State, what was the aftermath like in West Lafayette, in a town where, an upset like this in football was probably inconceivable just a year and a half before that?
Yeah, really, the town, for one, was kind of on fire for the whole week, just on cloud nine, and it was a blast as players. We went to our morning breakfast spot the day after the game, and I was with, my linemen and maybe one of my friends, and got a standing ovation leaving the breakfast, and it was kind of surreal a little bit, because it was one of those nights where, with Tyler's story, how well our defense played, and things just clicked for us on offense a little bit. Everything just went our way. Football's an emotional game, and we were playing inspired because of Tyler, and after that, we just saw kind of a completely different reaction. After starting 0-3, and that kind of being the cap of our 4-game win streak there, it was really special. It was a really fun time to be a Purdue football player, and we took a lot of pride in kind of winning that game. And I think they'll be talking about it for a long time. Obviously, some of the next couple of weeks didn't go as we would have liked, but that was an incredibly special evening, one I'll remember forever. Yes, for the game, but for Tyler, for everybody that was involved in that as well.
All right, David, well, you've been really generous with your time. Before we wrap up, I just want to get to one or two more topics, kind of cap it off here. And one thing that really piqued my curiosity as the season was wrapping up was the collective mood around the team while Jeff Brom was being targeted by Louisville in the coaching search.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of, curious what that atmosphere is like in the locker room within a team when a head coach is rumored to be potentially leaving. Like, do you guys talk amongst yourselves? Do rumors swirl in group texts? What happens on the ground there?
I think, with some of your closest friends, that's a comfortable conversation to have, to say, well, we understand Louisville, that's family. I couldn't be mad at a man for taking a pay raise and supporting his family, and going back home, I could, never be upset about that. And then there were, there's some guys who said, "Oh, there's no way he's leaving." There's some guys who thought maybe, there was potential, but he had been clear with everything for us since day one, really. he had told us that the rumors that Dan Dockich put out were not true. He had told us that, nothing, that he liked our team, that he liked everything about Purdue, and that he really enjoyed being the head coach. And that's what he shared, and he's a genuine man, and that's what we know to be true about him. And so while we didn't know exactly what the details were or all the rumors that were kind of floating around, we knew that, when people tweeted, "Oh, team meeting at 1 o'clock," we knew that there was no team meeting at 1 o'clock. And, that's about as far as kind of the rumors went with our team. It was like, "Oh, Jeff Brom's met with his team." No, he hadn't. And so we knew a little bit more than what the media knew, but not that much more. And then, of course, everybody was incredibly relieved when he stayed. And we really didn't have that much doubt that he was planning on staying. And, he had made promises and commitments, and we're glad he's going to be the coach, and Purdue's in good hands for a long time with Coach Brom.
So how did he let you guys know that he was definitely staying, and then what was the reaction amongst you and your teammates?
Actually, we were at dinner, eating in our All-American dining room, so we call it at Purdue, and we were at dinner, and the tweets just floated out that Coach Brom was staying at Purdue. And we had seen that it had been confirmed, and there was a press release. One of the Louisville media guys had received the release from, I think, the Brom family or Purdue, and that's how we found out. And the guys were confident as the week went on. Guys were confident that he was going to end up staying, and we were all relieved and wanted to, express to him that we were thankful for what he's done for us, and obviously, that we're glad to have him back, and Purdue's glad to have him as the head coach.
I'm glad you brought up Dan Dockich as well, because I have to thank you for the shade you threw at him after it was confirmed Brom was staying. You kind of put out a meme out there with you tagging Dockich and saying, laughing that he was wrong about it being a done deal to Louisville. So just thank you for your service on that one.
Well, I always wanted to use that picture. Dan's a good guy. It was just a little fun, and I knew if anybody could take it, it'd be him.
All right, David, before I let you go, I got to bring it up, even though it's probably a sore subject being so recent. But what happened in the bowl game against Auburn? Why do you think it got so out of hand?
That was a tough game for us. And I think, across the board, it shows Purdue has a long way to go to being that kind of top-tier program. And, we understand that. Well, we've competed with some good teams this year. They got out early on us, and they had a great defense, and their passing attack was hitting on all cylinders, and made it tough really for us to kind of get anything going. And that was a tough way for seniors to go out, a tough way for our whole program kind of to finish the season. But, that was a preseason top 10 team who had all the guys, had all the NFL guys, and we were kind of outmatched, I think. And I think with what Coach Brom's doing in recruiting, I think, for a long time you'll be able to see Purdue hang with teams like that. I think we were probably, maybe a year away from being able to hang with that Auburn team. They were, give them the credit. They played well. We didn't really play that well. Turnovers. I had some turnovers. And it just can't happen if you want to beat a top-tier program like that.
I like the honest assessment there. And last question, Dave, before I let you go, and it's kind of just a big picture wrap-up. Looking back to when you were an underclassman and where this all kind of started, there weren't many successes on the field from a team perspective. Stands were a lot emptier than they were these past couple years. There was no sparkling facility for the football team right next door to Ross-Ade Stadium. Looking back on all that, could you envision during those days that it would all turn out like it has?
I don't think I could. Even, when we struggled as a freshman, and then I led the country in interceptions, and then broke my ankle. Personally, I didn't think it would end up like it could. And for Purdue, the way we've kind of been able to finish, you put your head down and you go back to work and you believe that it can, but our guys did a good job of kind of removing the doubt that, we hadn't been playing good football, that we weren't a good team, and we played some of our best football when it mattered, and that's what I'm proud of during my time there. That the foundation's laid, and I'm thankful I got to be a part of some good seasons with some good wins, with some great members of the team, great friends that I'll be able to remember forever. And that's what I've always said about football. It's the people that you meet along the way. I think a lot of people have that same belief, and that's what I'm going to be thankful for about. And I can't wait to be a Boilermaker my entire life and follow Purdue really, for the rest of my life, and knowing about the adversity we overcame and the good times that we got to have.
All right, David. Well, you're very generous with your time. Really insightful discussion, and it's been a pleasure following your career as you've, not only had a great success on the field, but been a great ambassador for the team in the conference. So I appreciate that and wish you best of luck as your football career moves forward here.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
All right, thanks once again to David for joining me. A lot of fun talking to him. Always been one of my favorite athletes to kind of follow and cover during my time at BTN. Always super easy to deal with and talk to, and just awesome to have him on at this time following a really impactful career at Purdue, and during a difficult time as well when he had to really bury his best friend this past Tuesday, Tyler Trent. So really appreciate him taking some time this past week to join me. All right, now we'll get to the second part of this episode. It is our regular Stat Head segment. BTN researcher Harold Shelton. We go behind the numbers of Big Ten football and basketball. Plenty of basketball talk and some wrapping up of the college football season as well to lead off the segment. Wanted to, since we talked about it all year, just kind of put a nice tidy bow on things and give some final thoughts, and then get full steam ahead into basketball season, which is in full swing and got a couple months to go, so we'll have him on regularly as we move along as well. All right, without further ado, it's the Take 10 podcast Stat Head segment with researcher Harold Shelton. All right, very pleased to be back in the lab with BTN Stat Head Harold Shelton. It's our regular Stat Head segment. It's the first one in 2019. H, it's been a while, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I missed you. I missed being on.
I know. With the way the schedule, the holidays kind of worked out, this is the first episode in a while that we've done at all. And then just with me and you, kind of being in and out of the office at different times. And, the Big Ten Championship was over a month ago. And then all these holidays sprung up. It's hasn't come together until now, but I'm glad we're back.
Yeah, same here.
All right, so let's get right into it. We'll kind of put a bow on the college football season with the championship game wrapping up this week, and Clemson winning it all. Obviously, the Big Ten team was left out of the college football playoff, but there were 9 bowl teams to talk about. So we'll just put a bow on that and get your thoughts on not just the championship game, but overall the college football playoff structure. The debate seems to be heating up about potential expansion. What do you think, just from a broad view?
I do think expansion is needed, but I don't want to go too crazy with it. I still think 6 is the perfect sweet spot. That way you can still reward the top 2 teams. They can get a bye. 3 can play 6, 4 can play 5. You don't cheapen the regular season. Your conference championship game still matters. I mean, if we look at it this year, 7 was Michigan, and I think 8 was UCF.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, should a 2-loss Michigan that lost by 39 or however many points it was to Ohio State really deserve to get in without a conference championship, without even winning their division? I feel like at that point, if Georgia, they still wound up finishing 5th, but the year before, I think when Auburn was in the mix, if they would have lost the SEC championship game and they still get in, what's the purpose of these games?
Right.
The wins and losses should still matter. I think that happens if you keep it at 6. They seem to cheapen a little bit if you expand it to 8.
Right. I've always been a fan of 6 too, but for some reason it doesn't get talked about quite as much as I think it deserves to be. I think what that national championship game did for me overall is just kind of continue to highlight the absurdity of this cosmetic value we put on a team like Georgia and teams from the SEC in general, that just because, they push a perceived strong team to the brink and their losses look great, that they deserve to, with 2 losses, be in this conversation and be placed above an Ohio State team in the final rankings. I mean, it's just crazy to me because, Alabama then gets destroyed by Clemson, and I feel like, once your brand is talked about in that light, then for whatever reason you're kind of locked into that discussion, and other teams are on the outside looking in, and it just goes to a larger issue with football for me, as I've seen Big Ten teams get left out these last couple of years because of, really it's just Ohio State, but because of these bad losses. And I think Ohio State is a team with enough talent to beat a couple of those teams in the playoff, but in a sport like football, I feel like with a team like Ohio State, just with the way they're constructed, it's easy in a game like the Purdue or the Iowa game when things just kind of crumble. It's easy for an avalanche to happen and for you to quit. And everyone talks about those losses. Don't lose by 31 to Iowa. Don't get blown out by Purdue. I think there's a larger context there that needs to be discussed, because in football, for certain teams, it's easy to kind of say, all right, we'll get them next week, and for things to get out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that it can't just be a beauty pageant. It can't just be, oh, well, you have the most talent, so you deserve to be in. Like, wins and losses should still matter. Like, yes, Georgia, you pushed Alabama to the brink. Yes, you had a 2-touchdown lead against the backup quarterback, and you didn't finish the game. But you also lost by 20 to LSU. Like, that matters. Like, you had 2 losses. I don't care how great you looked. You had your chance. That was your playoff game, and you didn't win it. So wins and losses should still matter. And I know we've talked a lot about Ohio State and the Purdue game, but let's not forget, they're a 2-point conversion away from losing to Maryland.
True.
I mean, they gave up 50 in that game. Nebraska pushed them to the brink. They had close calls throughout the season. It's just that they were able to flip the switch those last 2 weeks against Michigan and Northwestern to give themselves a case. But they weren't playing like a top 4 team most of the year. And, again, wins and losses mattered for Ohio State and how they looked. The combo of the two certainly mattered, and it should matter for every league. I'm just tired of the bias of the SEC.
Yeah, and the last point I want to get off my chest before we stop talking about football for a handful of months here is just how college football seems to be, such a emphasis placed on the regular season. And I don't understand it, because other sports don't worry about the regular season nearly as much as the pundits seem to worry about the value that's being taken away from the regular season. Like, that seems to be always the defense of why it's kept at 4. Like, we'll take away value from the regular season. Like, I don't understand why the regular season matters so much to so many people. Like, March Madness is great because it's such a, highly vaulted postseason tournament. Other sports are fine without the regular season being, so emphasized. And by the nature of what college football is, the regular season is always going to be important. It's every week it's an event. It's the pageantry. College football is not losing significance because you go to 8 teams or 6 teams. I don't know if you agree, but I'm just sick of the regular season argument from what I see on college football Twitter and elsewhere.
I'd love that argument more if the regular season was uniform for everybody. Like, if everybody played the same amount of conference games, if everybody had the same championship game format, everybody's playing by the same rules, I think it would matter more. If everyone had 9 conference games, or if your best 2 teams made the championship game and there were no divisions, I'd be all for that argument. I do think it's important, but I think it becomes apples to oranges when you compare a ACC team that plays 8 games plus a FCS team plus a team from a bad division. That's not the same as playing a team that plays 9 conference games and has to play the second best team in their championship game no matter what.
Yeah, agreed. All right, before we wrap up all of our college football talk, just want to get your thoughts on the Big Ten bowl season. Went 5-4. What kind of grade do you give the conference overall?
I'd probably go B-. I'd say that because when the spreads for the games were first announced, the Big Ten was an underdog in 6 of them. I thought the fact that the Big Ten West definitely showed out. I mean, Minnesota and Wisconsin had very impressive wins against the ACC. The downside, Michigan took a huge loss, and they were the biggest favorite of any Big Ten team. And the fact that they laid a complete egg in a big spot certainly didn't help. Penn State was a pretty big favorite over Kentucky, and even though they came back and made that a game and had a chance at the end, that wasn't necessarily a good look. But it helped that our best team, Ohio State, went out to the Rose Bowl, took care of business in a game that the Big Ten doesn't normally win. So it was good to see that. But it was one of those where even though they went 5-4, it could have easily been 6-3 or 7-2 if Penn State and Michigan State would have taken care of business.
All right, put football talk on ice. It's winter. My Bears ripped my heart out the other day. I'm done talking about football for a while now. I'll watch the Super Bowl, maybe some of the playoffs, but that enough football for now. Let's get into college hoops talk. And as Big Ten guys, it's a fun time of year, especially this year, with Big Ten being really competitive night in and night out, and not just competitive where all the teams are kind of mediocre and they compete. These are some legitimately good teams that are playing ball right now in the Big Ten. The conference has had as many as 7 ranked teams. Right now, I believe there's 4 because kind of those 20 to 25 pinballed around. Wisconsin dropped out, but I think there'll be 6 or 7 in that neighborhood of the top 25 for the rest of the year. But it seems like right now at the top, the Big Ten, we're starting to see a little separation with those 2 Michigan schools.
Yeah, it's crazy that the runs that they've been on. I mean, if you look at going back to February of last year, Michigan's won 29 out of 30. I mean, that's just
that one was kind of important, though. But yeah, the one was definitely important.
But
still crazy.
The fact that 29 out of 30 in this day and age is tough, especially because they don't get the 4 and 5 star McDonald's All-American guys. So to rip off a run like that after losing all of those seniors and stuff too, I mean, that was impressive. And Michigan State's quietly won 17 straight Big Ten regular season games. So those two have kind of separated themselves. They're both in the top 6 in the AP poll. First time that those two have ever been ranked in the top 6 in the same poll.
Wow.
So you're definitely seeing some separation. We're going to see if those two can stay at the top by the time they play each other in about 7 weeks or so.
Yeah, it's weird how the schedule breaks down with those 2 games kind of come in the last week or 2 of the season.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I found interesting was I've been getting into KenPom the last couple of years. I know that's a big ranking system. Yeah, you're very into. And looking at the national rankings right now, Michigan State's ranked 3 full spots ahead of Michigan. Michigan State's at 14-2 at number 3. Michigan at 15-0 undefeated is at number 6. So without getting too deep into the weeds, why do you think that system favors Michigan State, and do you think Michigan State's actually a better team?
I don't know if they're a better team yet. I still think that Michigan State's offense is very reliant on Cassius Winston making plays for himself and everybody else. If they can't run, their offense can get bogged down at times. And we saw last year Winston struggled with Xavier Simpson whenever pressure was put on him. So I'm going to kind of withhold judgment on that and give Michigan a benefit of the doubt on that for now. I do think that they're playing better. Outside of Michigan's win over Indiana, I feel like they haven't played well in a month. They made big statements against Villanova, but we see Villanova isn't as good. Mm-hmm. Like, they're still good, but not as good as people thought.
Providence
the
isn't
win
great.
Over Providence, not so great. The win over Carolina will carry a lot of weight. But I think Michigan State had a tougher schedule, and even though they have 2 losses, one of those came in overtime without Matt McQuaid, and they've played 3 games in a row without Josh Langford and had a huge win at Ohio State. So I feel like just the way that they're playing, they're more efficient right now, and they played a tougher schedule, so I think that's part of the reason why they're ranked higher in KenPom.
Yeah, Michigan's schedule didn't do them any favors in December. They went a full 4 weeks without playing anyone that wasn't really like a bunch of bums out there.
And they didn't play well in those games.
Right. So, I mean, can't take anything away from them. They're outstanding, and they're going to have a chance to prove themselves coming up here. They got some tough games coming up, and both teams look fantastic and cemented at the top of the league. But I want to jump down a tier now and kind of talk about that next tier in the Big Ten. And right now, to me, I look at a few teams. I think there's 4 teams that are in it, 6 that could kind of be considered in that next tier of good to very good in the Big Ten. And right now, just by how they've been playing, I have Ohio State, Maryland, Indiana on potential. I mean, they're good. They have a very good record, but I just think when Finney gets back and when they're all playing healthy and with the potential of Langford, I think that can be a very good team and one that improves as the season goes on. And even though Wisconsin looked rough in the last couple weeks, I still have them in that tier. So I don't know if you agree, if I'm leaving anyone out, and what your thoughts are on the kind of good to very good tier in the Big Ten below Michigan and Michigan State.
I'm just glad we have a good to very good tier to talk about. I mean, last year,
a couple of years, it wasn't.
Last year we had 4 teams, that made the tournament, and I think we only had 4 ranked matchups the whole year. And so now,
dark times.
Yeah, exactly. Now we got 10 teams in the top 32. Like, I know there's only 4 in the top 25, but 27 through 32 are all Big Ten teams, so they're all waiting in the weeds. I assume Maryland will probably jump back in if they beat Indiana, but does that mean Indiana drops out and we keep this same, merry-go-round going? But I would say that Ohio State, Wisconsin, Maryland would kind of be my next 3. The way Maryland's playing right now is really impressive, and I think they have the 2 best NBA prospects in the league with Bruno and Jalen Smith.
You read my mind. I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
So I think the fact that they were able to get a big win at Minnesota. They struggled on the road last year, but you get a experienced point guard and Anthony Cowan with those 2 bigs down low, like they're a load. And so I think they'll have something to say about this race. Ohio State, Chris Holtman, just a great job again.
It's crazy.
And Indiana certainly talented enough. I agree with you. Once they get Finney back, there'll be a problem.
So a few teams I'm not sure about as far as their ceiling, but that I think will, if they handle business, be NCAA tournament caliber teams. Minnesota, Nebraska, who I was higher on earlier this season, and Iowa, who actually was lower on coming into this season. Those are the 3 kind of next teams that I think are all tournament caliber, but they still have some work to do, business to handle. Minnesota didn't help their cause. The loss to Maryland last night, kind of head scratcher. But then for every loss like that, they beat Nebraska in kind of a similar game.
And with the way that Wisconsin.
And the win was, so exactly. So that, there's just teams that I feel like all year are going to kind of be up and down. But I don't know if you agree or you think these, even the next tier even is still tournament caliber.
I think Nebraska's starting 5 is you could argue it's top tier caliber. Could even be second tier. The fact that they can't win away from Pinnacle Bank is a little disappointing considering all the experience that they have returning. But if you look, like they're just a really weird team. They're unranked. They have 3 conference losses, but they are 12th in the net right now. And so that's the new metric that's replaced the RPI. That's going to determine a lot of the at-large spots and things like that.
And their non-conference wins are aging very well, too.
Exactly. And so I feel like Nebraska, unless they just have a complete meltdown, will be a tournament team for sure. Minnesota and Iowa, I think they're going to have to do some real work in Big Ten play. Luckily, they'll have plenty of opportunities to do so. Minnesota, they had a lot of nice non-conference wins, but it's just names on paper. Those teams didn't wind up being any good. Like Washington's okay, Utah's not great, Oklahoma State's not great. So while they were nice wins on paper, they haven't really turned out to be against good teams. So they're going to have to do more work in conference play.
One team that we haven't talked about that I'm a little worried about right now is Purdue, even though I think talent-wise they belong in that discussion of teams we've just mentioned. But right now I think realistically they might be on that tier of Penn State and Northwestern. It's kind of the next one below, just by virtue of they haven't got it done on the court. I know the rankings like them, and I think they do have the talent to string some wins together and get to the NCAA tournament, especially because their margin for error, while in the loss column isn't that wide, in the KenPom and net rankings they have a pretty decent cushion still. So tell me why you think Purdue is still in decent shape considering they have a 9-6 record.
Well, the good thing for them is that since the league is so deep, there's so many chances for quality wins. There'll be a ton of opportunities for quality 1 and 2 wins. They just have to find a way to win one of those games on the road. Yesterday it was 6 or 7 point game.
Against Michigan State,
against in the final 6 minutes, but just couldn't find a way to pull through. They're really kicking themselves for that Florida State loss. I mean, they're up 8 with about 4 minutes to go, and had a chance down the stretch with their 2 leaders, with Klein and Edwards, and couldn't put the game away. we wouldn't even be having this conversation if they had that scalp on their resume. Unfortunately, 9-6 definitely not great, but they still are top 25 in the net as of Wednesday. So I think they'll still be fine, but they can't afford to, finish under 500 in conference play because they didn't get the non-conference wins. The good news, the other conferences like the Pac-12 and the Big East aren't nearly as strong. I mean, Pac-12 might be a one-bid league.
Pac-12's trash.
Pac-12's had a lot of issues. In the Big East, it's not as deep as it's been. So those are extra bids that have to go somewhere. And so Purdue might benefit. They could be a team that has 13, 14 losses and still make the tournament.
Yeah, and Penn State, Northwestern are teams that, you come in the season, you're like, maybe right now just the results aren't there that would indicate they're more than NIT teams right now. I mean, that could change. I think there's talent in those teams. And then Illinois Rutgers playing for the future at this point, seeing what you got and, trying to upset a couple teams here and there. The league is still, that was kind of the saying when the league was not as good the last couple of years, is that it's competitive top to bottom. I still think that's true, and that some of those bottom four teams could rise up and knock a team off on a given night. We saw Northwestern almost beat Michigan. But at this point, I think it's starting to crystallize a little bit about who's for real.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other thoughts before we wrap up here? We had a good, almost 20-minute discussion. Plenty of hoops left, and we got a couple months left to play. So if anything to add? If not, we can get to it next week.
Just kind of enjoying this 20-game schedule. I feel like we'll get a true champion. More time to actually prepare for the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament, which will help me.
Yeah, the tournament's like 2 full weeks later this year than last year,
exactly.
So it seems much farther away right now.
Selection Sunday on St. Patrick's Day. I mean, we're a long way off, so a lot more hoops to discuss.
All right, sounds good. We'll be back here soon.
All right, sounds good.
All right, thanks once again to Harold and David for joining me on today's episode. Always appreciate chatting with those guys, and I always appreciate everyone out there listening as well. A couple more thank yous. I want to give a shout out to my producer Wes White. Julie Bronder helps out as well, and then my assistant producer Colleen Degnan. Got some fun stuff planned for the future of the Take 10 podcast. There'll be some potential new segments and new guests coming in. We're going to keep this rolling every week as much as we can. Sometimes we'll miss a week here or there, but definitely subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And like I said, we have some fun stuff planned that will be rolled out in the coming weeks. So till next time, thanks to everyone out there for listening. Thanks to my producers for helping out. And we'll talk to you soon here on the Take 10 podcast.